The long journey of the Shebl family started decades ago in Egypt. This ancient land was home of the memories passed on from generations to create our modern history. My grandparents Faiza and Shadi were born in a small town called Tanta. This farming-rich town is where it all began. My grandmother Faiza was born on January 10th, 1939. She was the typical old-fashioned mother, staying at home, looking after the kids, and making sure the house runs in place. The culture in Egypt was very different in Canada, where both parents had to work. Egyptian mothers were typically stay-at-home moms. This all changed when a fierce movement for women to vote was held in 1953, which fought for women's rights. By 1956, it was in the Egyptian constitution that women could finally vote for their party. This movement did not just help women vote, but allowed and motivated women to hold higher positions in parliament. My grandmother had only finished her high school education when she was married at the age of 17 to my grandfather, Shadi. Shadi was born on December 16, 1930. He started off his undergraduate education in the Cairo School of Police, where he had to go through rigorous training to finally graduate and work all across Egypt. He first started as a lieutenant in the city of Aswan. He worked his way to the highest regarded officer ranking that can be achieved, Major General. On October 6, 1973, hoping to win back territory lost to Israel during the Third Arab-Israel War in 1967, Egyptian and Syrian forces launched a coordinated attack against Israel on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. Shadi was part of the whole operation, not on the front lines, but helping organize, arrange, and order the troops to victory. This battle is regarded as one of the most iconic victories in Egyptian history, and is now a national holiday. Shadi retired at the age of 65, but the tradition continued. My uncle Ahmed was also a police officer who got his training in the same institution as my grandfather. Born on the 19th of February 1958, he was a Major General at the age of 50, having served all across Egypt, from Alexandria to Port Said to Suez. In September of 1970, President Nasser died, having never recovered his leading role among Arab states after the 1967 defeat, and is succeeded by Vice President Anwar al-Sadat. Ahmed was there to witness the presidency of Anwar al-Sadat, and one of the biggest things that happened is the beginning process that leads to 1979 peace treaty when he visits Israel. This was the start of Arab-Israel peace that lasted to this day. When Ahmed started his career in the police, one of the first things he worked was the Suez. On June of 1975, the Suez Canal was reopened for the first time since the Six-Day War in 1967, and Ahmed was working as a captain there, overseeing operations and keeping security. Ahmed and Shadi weren't the only two major generals in the family, but also my uncle Tariq. Tariq is also Shadi's son, who was born on September 10, 1959. Tariq followed his brother's footsteps, climbing up the ranks and participating in a lot of historic events. In October of 73, Egypt begins negotiations for the return of Sina after the war. Tariq, being a major at the time, was in Sina helping with the issue as a law enforcer. The negotiations were successful and Sina is now proudly a part of Egypt. Tariq was married to a family friend. Her name was Sohair. Together they had 4 children, the oldest being my cousin, Muhammad. Muhammad is another policeman in the long line of law enforcement. Born on March 19, 1987, Muhammad was involved in more modern political events in Egypt. Algeria and Egypt were always rivals and had tense political ties, and in 2012 these ties became even tenser. A winner goes to the World Cup game made this do-or-die soccer game even more important. After Egypt lost the game, there were riots in the stadium and both countries were fined for aggressive behavior. But Muhammad participated in something much larger than the soccer game, something that will change Egypt forever: the fall of Mubarak. Following the trend of the Arab Spring, Egypt held its own protests to take over the tyrant rule of President Mubarak. In 2011, April through August, protests continue in Cairo Tahrir Square over a slow pace of political change. Muhammad, unlike his father, wasn't a high enough rank to order and plan from afar. Instead, he was an enforcer in the streets, watching the protests firsthand. He was also part of the military movement to overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood from power and had to oversee 4 years of protest. To this day, of the fight to regain stability in the system. While conditions were tough in Egypt, Canada was looking forward to an age of strength and prosperity. Egypt was looking to fix the present, but my parents were looking forward towards the future, and it finally clicked: the decision to immigrate to Canada, the true north. After years of acceptance, my family were finally able to come to Canada in 2010. My mother Hala, born on November 2nd, 1970, and father Hisham, born on February 7th, 1960, made this decision for a very important reason: education. Having 4 children, the decision took time, but ultimately the right one to make. In 2010, Canada accepted 3,400 Egyptian immigrants, which is 1.4% of the total immigrant rate. My parents both came from the same town, Tanta. They met in the University of Tanta, where they fell in love. My father Hisham is an optometrist, and my mother finished a finance degree and is also a real estate broker. Together, they opened a cafe in Egypt called Bino's. They did everything in order to ensure we are safe and that we get a better future. Me and my 3 brothers, Mustafa, Amr, and Ahmed, are their legacy, and everything that happened in the past will only fuel us to do better in the future. And this is my place in the world history.